My guest today is the original tree hugger. The phrase was coined back in the 70s when she, along with a group of women in India, hugged trees to stop them from being chopped down. In the decades since, Vandana Shiva has become known throughout the world for her environmental campaigns. She says 1 billion people go hungry in the world because of the way greedy international companies go about their business. So is that a naive worldview, or could we really end poverty and improve everyone's life by returning to old-fashioned ways of farming? Vandana Shiva, welcome to Hard Talk.
My pleasure to be here with you.
Now, you have said that people are pushed into poverty rather than, perhaps as many in the West presume, are sort of lying there needing a rope to pull them out. What do you mean by that?
Well, first, on the chipko, the tree hugging, I would want to clarify I was a young student, a volunteer, and no one had to really hug trees. The women said they would hug trees, and they'd have to be killed before the trees were cut. And eventually, after 10 years of direct action, the logging was stopped. This is so deeply connected to the issue of how poverty is created, because those logging operations were creating revenue, so measured in money, there was more money, but it was leaving less water, less fodder, less fuel, all of which women bear the responsibility for. They were walking extra miles to fetch that extra pot of water. And they rose and said, enough is enough, stop this destruction. So poverty is created each time the survival base of people, especially women, is destroyed, each time a livelihood is destroyed, each time resources are grabbed.
So is your argument that actually if international companies got out of the way and took their greedy hands off things, that families, that people in India, for example, would be able to feed themselves, would be fine?
Well, the two big issues related to India's contemporary context. We are having very high levels of growth. So measured in terms of growth, India is doing extremely well. But if people were doing better, they wouldn't be fighting every time their land is grabbed. I think one of the biggest political issues in India is land grab, where the land of small farmers, and legally no one can be a big farmer in India because we had land reforms after independence, and the average holding, 80% of the land holdings are less than 2 hectares. That is where livelihoods and survival come from. When you lose that and it's grabbed, that's poverty.
You've been running this campaign, which on behalf of farmers, for seed freedom. You talk about the fact that they are enslaved by the way that they are sold seeds.
I had not imagined when I was doing my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory that I would spend so much of my time looking at the issue of seed, agriculture, land use. I started Navdanya, the movement for seed saving, when I realized that corporations wanted to patent seed, which was wrong in and of itself because patents are granted for inventions, the seed is not invented. But the only reason you take a patent is to collect royalties. Royalties mean costlier seeds. Royalties mean seed that is renewable by its very nature is now made non-renewable. And we see the consequences of this in India, where since the big companies came in and took over the seed supply, especially in cotton, we have had 270,000 farmer suicides, most of them driven by debt, and the debt caused by high-cost non-renewable seeds.
So you are blaming the seed company, multinational seed companies, for those suicides?
I am not involved in a blame game. I am first and foremost a scientist, and that scientist in me, because I've done the studies, the correlations are absolutely clear.
But the suicides predate the introduction.
No, they don't. The suicide epidemic, I mean, a few suicides will always be in a society, but look at Spain, since the crisis and the foreclosures, how many people who've lost their homes have committed suicide? Pressure of that kind
Sure, but
97, the government of India keeps track of farmer suicides. The graph starts to climb, and the significant suicides among farmers start in 97.
Everybody accepts that there is a very big problem with suicides in farmers. I mean, the numbers, whichever you look at, and there are varying
numbers. And they
numbers.
begin in 97, 98.
And that predates.
And in the cotton area. No.
But because one of the, and I imagine that you would accept this, there are many reasons for farmers being under pressure. And there were many people would challenge your suggestion that it is down to the multinational companies.
It is down to debt. Why are farmers being trapped in debt when they weren't in debt earlier? Because they're getting into debt for seed, and they're getting into debt for chemicals, because the seeds which were supposed to control pests aren't really controlling pests, they're creating new pests. Our studies on the ground show a 13-fold increase in pesticide use in the area with the highest farmer suicides, the area of Vidarbha in Maharashtra. 8,000% increase in the price of seed, farmers, from 5 to 7 rupees up to 4,000 rupees a kilo.
Farmers have always had to buy seed, then?
No, that is the whole issue. Seed has always been a renewable resource in farmers' hands, particularly in the hands of women farmers. They were the breeders, they were the conservers, they were the custodians of seed. We see a new property right being introduced in the seed sector, beginning with the World Trade Organization.
Okay, now the argument, we should say that the argument for the patenting is that a company, and for example Monsanto, and there are quite a few companies who are involved with this, but Monsanto make the point that what they are doing is that they are effectively adding value, and the yields on a lot of these seeds are much higher. So they say no business can survive without being paid for its product. The loss of revenue would hinder their ability to invest in research and development to create new products, which they make the point that farmers want. They're investing $2.6 million per day developing new products to bring to market. And there is a market for it because the farmers want this seed.
Well, every one of those claims is false. First, that the farmers want it. I was puzzled, why are farmers constantly using the BT cotton of Monsanto? Why is 95% of the cotton seed in India now Monsanto's? The public sector, the government breeding programs stop when a giant like Monsanto enters. The Cotton Research Institute, one of the world's top research institutes in cotton, hasn't released a single new variety since Monsanto entered. Are they giving us something new that's of value to citizens? No, there are only 2 traits they've managed to offer so far. A genetically engineered BT crop and a genetically engineered herbicide resistant. But they're not stopping at this.
BT crop is producing higher yields.
No, it's not. They claimed it would produce 1,500 kilograms. That used to be on the original label.
Study after study, independent
500. Average is 400 to 500. This is government statistics.
Take a look at somebody like Dr. Soman Sahai, who runs a gene campaign in Delhi. Now, she is an environmentalist in many ways, and she says that for example, if the government booted out Monsanto, to sum up her argument, it won't mean the problems for farmers go away.
If the success of BT cotton was so huge, a parliamentary committee of India would not, after 2 years of deep study and talking to everyone, including the Monsantos, have recommended to government that this is a wrong path. If BT crops were wonderful,
and the
we would have had a moratorium.
And the government hasn't accepted that argument, and many people don't, because they say it's a dangerous argument. You have a situation at the moment where it is widely accepted, I know you don't accept these figures, that the yields have doubled.
No, they haven't. That's an absolute fraud. If yields had doubled, why would farmers be in distress?
Are yields any better?
No.
So are yields worse?
They're worse if you take the overall production of a farm. Cotton in India never grew as a monoculture. Cotton was grown with the tur dal and the sorghum and the chilies and the vegetables. You create a monoculture, of course you'll have more cotton in the world. You'll have more cotton in India. You'll have more cotton in a farmer's field. Monocultures do not produce more food.
Professor Prakash of the University of Tuskegee,
yes, I've debated him often,
in Alabama, he says in the 10 years since BT cotton was introduced, cotton yields have doubled in India.
Cotton yields have doubled only because you don't measure a biodiversity of a basket of output.
So you accept that cotton yields have doubled?
Only because it's a monoculture. If everyone's producing...
Your argument is, yes, cotton yields have doubled, but other things have suffered.
No, all I'm saying is cotton yields have doubled not because of the BT technology, but because you've only grown cotton. If
you
all
mean
you grow...
People who weren't growing cotton before are now growing it?
No, and those who were growing cotton, after all, cotton is an Indian crop. Farmers in India have been growing cotton for centuries.
But that's a different sort, surely. I mean, he's talking about yield.
No, this is the heart.
Yield
no, the yield is always measured of a single crop.
Exactly.
Whereas output measures the whole basket.
So do you accept that yields have doubled?
But not because of a technology, because of a replacement. Very different. The Green Revolution is also claimed to have increased the yields of food.
I'm trying to help us follow your argument here. You're saying that the yields have doubled. You accept that argument, but you're putting it down to something else.
I'm putting it down to replacing diversity and mixtures of crops where you grow many things to growing a single crop. Now, it doesn't matter how that crop was produced. It could be BT, it could be chemical, it could be organic. If you grow only one crop, you'll have more of that one crop. That is the secret of increased yields. It is a yield of a single commodity. And if this was the solution to hunger in the world, why would so many people be hungry? Why are only 2%?
But what you found is, as a result of those increased yields in cotton, India is now an exporter of it. It's now the leading exporter in the world, having been ranked the third country. So farmers are making money out of it. Yes, some have suffered. And
no, that's not true, Sarah. It's not true for the simple reason India was an exporter of cotton during British rule. We had the Deccan riots around the falling price of cotton. There have been times where the price of cotton has fallen even as the exports increased. Because more exports doesn't mean farmers earn more. More exports can often mean farmers earn less.
So why are farmers wanting it? Because there is a huge demand.
Like I said, there's a closure of options. Why are farmers only growing corn in Europe? Why are farmers in Argentina only growing Roundup Ready soya? This is not a reflection of choice. It's a reflection of the closure of choice.
Okay, but you take a look at something else. Let's say grain. We know that grain, wheat, has gone up hugely in the sort of last 10 years, in fact over decades. And India is now a country that is capable of feeding itself. You go back to the times that you seem to be advocating a return to, and it was a time when India suffered from famines, was running up huge debts to import food just to feed its own people.
3 quick responses on that. Yes, India had a great Bengal famine, 2 million people died, but it was not because we had lack of rice. It was because the British Empire was extracting half the production of rice, which is why women came out and led a Tebhaga movement saying, we will give our lives, we will not give our rice. Jaan debo, dhan debo na, was the call out of Bengal. 42, that led to the Quit India movement, etc. Secondly, it is true that we are growing a lot more rice and a lot more wheat. But exactly as in the case of cotton, this is by replacing other crops. 2 million tons are rotting in the godowns. Every second Indian child is today so severely malnourished, and every 4th Indian is today hungry, something we've not had after independence. This is all a result today of food having been reduced to a commodity and being destroyed as a source of livelihood on the one hand for the farmer and a human right for those who must eat.
What are you advocating? Are you seriously saying that India should go back to the methods of farming that were in place in the 60s?
I'm not talking about a back, I'm talking about a forward to a more sane use of scarce land, scarce water, and rich biodiversity. Our work over the last 25 years since I started Navdanya is showing that we produce 2 to 3 times more food per acre. And this has far more nutrition per acre, because when you grow food for nourishment, you maximize nutrition.
Yes. Now, and we should explain, this campaign it stands for 9 seeds.
Yes.
It's the idea of it being biodiversity.
And I think
it's your own campaign you set
the
up.
whole focus on two aspects. One, commodity production, and two, chemicals and GMOs, is so misguided. Only 2% of the soya in the United States is being eaten as food. Only 8% of the corn. The rest is going for biofuel. The rest is going for animal feed. This is not a food system.
Okay.
So we have to go beyond it, and we have to go into a more futuristic work which is based on the absolutely timeless ecological principles of the nutrient cycles, the water cycles.
So you go back, and you have been campaigning for organic, effectively a return to organic farming, and 4 states have taken this on.
I think it's not a return, it's a moving ahead. 5 states of India we work with,
so you
which have made a
yields
commitment.
Are low. Can we to go back to the yield argument? And is that because organic farming, even in sort of modern systems, you look at the European system, yields are 20% lower than.
No. We must focus on output, and output is double to triple. Output means the full basket of what you produce on a farm. You don't just need cereals. You need your pulses, you need your oilseeds, you need your dairy, you need your fruit, you need your vegetables. Now, it's a trick of reducing the output to a single yield, then claiming you produce more. Most of it goes to users other than food. That's the reason we have starvation. And what I'm advocating is what the United Nations is advocating. The UN Rapporteur on Food, Oliver de Schutter, has submitted reports to the United Nations showing there can be a 3-fold increase in food production through ecological methods. The International Assessment of Agricultural Science Technology for Development, body set up by the United Nations, has said there's only one way to go, ecological, agroecology.
But whatever the problems that India now has, you look at where it has come from, and you look at, say, since 1991, economic reforms, and we're talking about all these things that happened at the same time, where a country was suddenly able to feed itself. You've had average growth of 8% in that time period. This is a country that has been doing, I mean, the rest of the world is looking on in amazement, thinking we want some of that, and you are so critical. And I'm sure many people will think, look, it sounds wonderful, but it sounds totally naive and not realistic.
But I think the reality of India is that huge growth rate we are seeing has come through converting people's wealth and people's resources into the capital and riches of a handful of oligarchs. I won't go into too much detail on that. But if India's growth rate was converting into higher food entitlements, every 4th Indian wouldn't be hungry. Every 2nd child wouldn't be wasted. And this is government figures according to the National Family Health Survey.
Okay, but you look at...
Because the very means...
We can quote stats at each other.
No, but the very means of producing food...
Poverty down from 45% in 1994 to 32% in 2010.
But it depends on how you measure poverty, and these debates are perennial debates in India. The World Bank would like to measure it in terms of how much money is spent. But if you commodify everything, of course you'll spend more money.
Literacy
if you have to buy your water, you have to buy your electricity, you'll spend more.
But the country has got wealthier, the country has got less poor.
No, it hasn't got wealthier as a country. In terms of education, it depends on what you're measuring again. Because primary education is suffering deeply. Privatized education is growing. The privatization of health, the privatization of food, the privatization of education, these are the debates that are everyday debates in our parliament, on our streets. But food is an area where I work day and night. And I can tell you, the Indian people are not doing well if they've lost their land, which fed them. They're not doing well if they're growing cash crops and commodities and flowers for exports. Okay. But worse, even the wealthy are doing badly on the food front. Because we have become the heart, the center, the epicenter of diabetes because of junk food. Now, I don't believe being thrown into a junk food treadmill is an improvement and progress and development for a country.
But that's
a result of globalization.
And that's surely also, the answer to that is education. When you look at, come back to these arguments about where India has come from and where it is going to. You look at wheat production now, which you talk about, and I know you say, look, yields are all very good, but look at the output. Wheat production rose from 10 million tonnes in the end of the 60s to 85 million tonnes now per year. That is a phenomenal increase, and that is surely part of the answer as to why the country can now feed itself?
No, it's not part of the answer, because I work across the length and breadth of my country, saving seeds, growing ecological farms. And everywhere I go, people tell me wheat used to be 1% or 2% of our cropping pattern. 1 or 2% of our diet. We had the millets. We had all kinds of other grains. We had the pulses, which have absolutely disappeared, the only source of protein for vegetarians. So the disappearances aren't being measured.
And those who say to you,
what was covering 2%?
You're from the middle classes. You don't really know what it's like. If you really had come
No, I happen to have spent the last 25 years of my life working in the farms of India, and in fact setting up a farm myself for research, for conservation, measuring every output of every little plot of land, seeing how with ecological systems you can reduce water use, increase productivity, get rid of fossil fuels and get rid of toxins.
So in terms of what should happen now, let's go back in a sense to the your tree-hugging days, where you didn't actually have to hug a tree. No. But you were prepared to put your body in the way of a big company to stop it. Is that what you want Indian people to do now?
Well, we have been putting ourselves in the way. We are hugging the seed. But because we have had this movement, our laws recognize that farmers have rights. We have a Farmers' Rights Act, something no one else has had, because we have a movement. We have...
And the aim of the Supreme Court now, or the suggestion by one committee that there could be a ban on GM foods, well, how likely is that?
Well, there's already a ban, because 2 years ago, Monsanto tried to push BT eggplant. India is the home of aubergine eggplant diversity. And they tried to push a BT eggplant. 7 centres, we had public hearings. A moratorium was put by the government, by the Environment Minister.
So who does it come down to, the government, the people or companies?
Well, it has to be democracy, and democracy means people give direction to government to regulate companies. That's how democracies are supposed to work. Democracies aren't supposed to be of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations.
So are you wanting people to take part in direct action? Are you calling for them to break the law?
Well, we learned from Gandhi that bad law must be disobeyed. When the British tried to impose the salt laws, he walked to Dandi Beach, picked up the salt, said, nature gives it to us for free. We need it for our survival. We will continue to make salt. That's what got us our independence. And today we follow Gandhi to say patents are a fraud on the earth, on biodiversity, on future generations. We will continue to make
What are you wanting people to do, though?
We want people to constantly reproduce, exchange, save seed. And any law anywhere that treats seed saving as a crime and treats diversity as a crime is worthy of disobeying.
And those farmers who have signed agreements saying they will not reuse any seed that they can propagate,
well, the problem,
you say break that.
The problem is so many farmers who haven't signed agreement are being criminalized right now in Europe, because they are growing diversity, they're saving seeds. There's a new seed law, 2010, which I'm calling on the Europeans to not cooperate with, as we told the Prime Minister of India in 2004, when a similar law was being brought in, to say we will not obey.
Isn't it too late for India now?
Not at all. I think we are way ahead in the defense of the freedom of seed, in the defense of biodiversity, and in the defense of freedom of farmers and people to have access to life in its abundance and richness.
Because do you seriously believe, though, that you can get to a point where you do not have multinational companies who have patented seeds and you don't have GM foods in India?
Well, we don't have GM foods in India because for 10 years we've been keeping them out. We only have GM cotton, only cotton, and it is failing. And I can tell you in 5 years' time, there will be no BT cotton in India.
Vandana, Shiva, thank you very much for coming on Hard Talk.